Hello and happy National Religious Freedom Day. This is a day that's not usually recognized by most Americans, but is truly one of the most important historical events in the history of our great country. In fact, some could say the most important. It was 232 years ago when the General Assembly of Virginia passed the Virginia Statute on Religious Freedom, authored by Thomas Jefferson, who previously was the second governor of Virginia, but in that year was in a position to advocate it because he had served previously in the General Assembly, had introduced it in 1779, but because of the Revolutionary War and some other factors, him being gone to Paris for his ambassadorship, it wasn't until some 7 years later in 1786 when the statute was actually passed on January the 16th. So this is a critically important day in American history. I think back fondly to the time when I was in the General Assembly serving with the chairman and president of your terrific organization, the Prayer Caucus, the Congressional Prayer Caucus. My good friend Randy Forbes, who was an outstanding member of the House of Delegates with me, the Senate of Virginia, and then on to the United States Congress. And now, as he has been for decades, a champion for religious freedom. But I remember that I used to introduce a resolution from the governor every year commemorating this day, and then have the opportunity to give a brief floor speech to remind our fellow legislators of the importance of this act and Virginia's contribution through Mr. Jefferson's bill to preserve religious freedom as a hallmark and a tenet of the American experience. I would say that 232 years later, that statute is still on the books of Virginia, unedited, even though Jefferson said it could be edited by later generations, but because of the skill of the writer and the incredible language and principles embodied in that Jefferson, though he's been accused of being a deist, though he understood the importance of the separation of church and state, rightly understood why that statute now has been on the books for all these years and has been so important. As everyone knows, it became really the precursor to the Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause in the First Amendment to the United States Constitution that was adopted just a few years after Mr. Jefferson wrote this very powerful language embodied by George Mason, another Virginian who was the chief author of the Bill of Rights. And so I'm so glad that the Congressional Prayer Caucus Foundation is using this day to celebrate this remarkable achievement in not only American but human history, to realize that government should not control the dictates of conscience and mind. In fact, that's how the statute starts by Mr. Jefferson, that Almighty God hath created the mind free. What a beautiful way to start. And therefore, he goes on to say that compelling men to think things that they don't want to think, or to practice religion in a way that they don't want to practice, or compelling them to give money for causes that they disagree with, is both sinful and tyrannical. That's how strongly he felt about this concept of human freedom and, even more importantly, religious freedom. I think most of us would probably agree that this idea of religious freedom has given America a unique place in world history. It's why the statue of Lady Liberty in the New York Harbor is still one that beckons people from all over the world to come here, because we have religious freedom, we therefore have economic freedom, and then we have political freedom, but we'd have neither if we didn't start with this wonderful concept of religious freedom that Jefferson recognized, didn't create, recognized from the foundations of man that God planted in the human heart from the dawn of creation. So it's so good that we celebrate this today. I think it's not coincidental that just a couple of years after Jefferson wrote this in 1777, that another great Virginian who's here behind me, George Washington, recognized how important the ability to pray and seek divine providence and seek God's help in times of trouble was to the American experience. And I would say that but for Mr. Washington on his knees at Valley Forge in that horrible winter of 1777 and 1778, the history of America might have turned out very differently. But he understood that that you must petition God for help in a free country if you're going to be able to be successful in battle, or in government, or in life. And as you know, the rest is history. 3 years later at Yorktown, Virginia, the Revolutionary War came to an end in just an incredible way. And so knowing that history is important to know that this Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom effectively ended the church state of England, the control of the king over the church, and thus the control of government over the human mind and how to believe and think as one wished. And it's been often said that this established this wall of separation between church and state, and that's true. But that was in a letter later on that Mr. Jefferson wrote to the Danbury Baptist Church. It's not in the Constitution, and it certainly didn't mean the control ending the relevance of God in government. In fact, it was just the opposite. It was to keep the state out of the church, not to keep the church out of the state, or being salt and light to the body politic. That's a common misunderstanding today. So because all of you understand this, I would say that this is critically important that we fight for religious liberty today. Jefferson understood it to be any religion was to be protected in the body politic. And of course, we've got multiple religions in America today, Christianity still being the dominant one, the one that I share, and I think many of you do as well. But without religious freedom, without religious liberty, it allows the government to control the dictates of one conscience, or other institutions in society to do that. And to Mr. Jefferson and our founders, that was absolutely antithetical to the American experience. It's why many of them left England, to be able to come here, not only to own property and to have economic freedom, but also to have freedom of their mind to do as they wished according to the dictates of their conscience. So I hope you will be inspired today by what you talk about. I hope you'll understand that First Amendment to the United States Constitution is really that essential liberty that controls really all other freedoms. Without freedom of the mind, there is no other political, economic, or other kind of freedom in one's life, and that's why it needs to be continually, vigorously defended and advocated. We can see here in America when we have an increasing secularization of our society, increasing progressive agenda in our society, where fewer people now say they believe either believe in God or ascribe to a moral code outside of themselves or a higher power. I think you can see we've had some decline in ethics and the stability of our republic, and we've seen over these last couple decades a rise in some social dysfunction, whether it's divorce or children born out of wedlock or sexually transmitted diseases, and on and on. I think the lack of people's attention to matters of faith and morals and religion have been coincident with the decline in some of the important things about the American Republic. So thank you for taking this on with the Congressional Prayer Caucus Foundation. Thank you for being willing to stand for this bedrock idea of American civilization. It was so important to Mr. Jefferson that even though he was governor of Virginia and president of the United States, those weren't important enough to put on his tombstone. It was the Declaration of Independence, founding UVA, and authoring the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, because he understood how important that was to the long-term preservation of the American Republic. So I hope you exchange great ideas today. I hope you finish this day energized about the importance of this idea of religious liberty. I hope you'll take that battle into the courthouses and state houses and the national legislature to be sure that this principle of being able to worship God as you so choose and that to exercise in a free way your duty to your Creator, which is religion, as Mr. Jefferson defined it, is what you'll continue to do. So God bless you. Thank you very much for listening to me for a few minutes. It's been a pleasure to be with you here long distance. Thank you very much.